Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. I'm Sara Baer-Sinnott, president of Oldways, and I am very pleased to be in conversation with Dariush Mozaffarian, who's a medical doctor, cardiologist, and also the Dean and Jean Meyer Professor of Nutrition at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Dariush, it's great to see you again. And
Nice.
we've known at Oldways, we've known you for quite a while. And when we first met you because of research you were doing on fish and seafood consumption and health. So thinking back on your career in nutrition, what do you think were the most successful messages and maybe also the biggest misconceptions?
Well, the misconceptions are why I became involved in nutrition in medical school and in internal medicine and cardiology. In all those years of training, it was clear to me that nutrition was the top cause of poor health in my patients, and yet I wasn't learning anything about it in all of those years of training. And so I decided to read about it myself and at least learn myself. And so that was the first epiphany that the number one cause of poor health is not being addressed in healthcare, which explains a lot about the mess we're in and why we're spending $1 in $5 in our economy on healthcare. And then when I started reading the science myself, and this was in the late 90s, all the focus was on low-fat diets, and yet even then in the 90s, the evidence didn't support that. The science didn't support that. And so that was the second big epiphany, was that the science that we have isn't being translated to the public. And so because of that, I became very interested in trying to understand these things. My career goal has always been public impact, to try to help as many people or millions of people as possible at a time. And so I felt through research in nutrition, I could really make it a difference. And so naturally, thinking about fats, and as a cardiologist, having written admission orders for patient after patient where I write cardiac diet, you literally write 2 words, and that means a low-fat, low saturated fat diet, low cholesterol diet. I realized that I want to understand more about fats, and where better than to start is with healthy fats. And among the many healthy dietary fats that there are, omega-3s are now recognized as one of the best. And so that's how I really started researching fish and omega-3s as a way to really try to understand dietary fats. And I think that the misconceptions that remain is still the majority of Americans from recent polling still believe that eating more fat is bad for you. So that's still just a huge misperception. And I still hear even smart scientists and other public figures saying fat, sugar, and salts together as a shorthand for what's harmful in the food supply. And I keep trying to nudge them a little bit towards at least saying starch, sugar, and salt, because it's really starch, sugar, and salt, not fat, sugar. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about healthy fats. And then I think secondly, and we could go on for a long time about misconceptions, but I think secondly, there's a lot of misconceptions about how powerful diet is. This is the single leading cause of poor health in our country and on the planet, full stop. And yet it's still kind of poo-pooed and not given the attention, and thought, oh yeah, nutrition is important, but we have to focus on X, Y, or Z because that's more important right now for health. And that's just not true. And then I would say, in terms of messages that have gotten through, started to get through, partially healthy fats are good for you. That message has started to get through to some people. I think secondly, that it's about foods, not nutrients. That's the second message, which hopefully we can talk about more, that you're not going to, with a few exceptions, you're not going to get healthier by focusing on any individual nutrient. You got to think about foods. And then third, the food system is broken. And I think COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement have really, driven that home for people, that we have a broken food system and it has to be fixed.
I agree with you. And at Oldways, we are so pleased to be part of the Federal Nutrition Advisory Coalition, that you are such a force in organizing and leading. And with new studies about nutrition science coming out almost every day, why is it so important to strengthen our federal nutrition research efforts?
Well, you mentioned the Nutrition Advisory Coalition, this is a group that we've convened with support from the Rockefeller Foundation, and it now includes over 90 organizations, clinical organizations, advocacy groups, nonprofits, public health groups, anti-hunger groups, and importantly, for-profit businesses, investment groups, from health, food to farming to others. And I think it's a really important group because it highlights that everyone actually kind of agrees that we need to fix the food system, including business and industry. People often raise industry as though its only goal is to make people sick. And of course, there are products that are making people sick, but the food system is very complex and very heterogeneous, and the private sector has to be part of the solution. And so the fact that we've been able to bring together nonprofits, advocacy, clinical groups, and the private sector to all agree that we have to advance nutrition innovation in our country and nutrition coordination in our country, I think is very important. You asked specifically about nutrition science and research and innovation. All of humanity owes its progress to advances in knowledge and science, and that's how we've progressed and done damage, but that's also how we've progressed as a species. And especially the last 100 years of human history, right? Most of the advances in human longevity and prevention of starvation and almost everything has been due to science. And so nutrition science is just as important, if not more important, given its impact on health of people and the planet. And so, we looked in the report that we published last year, we looked at sort of the last 40 years of nutrition science funding in the United States, and we found two striking problems. One is that as a proportion of overall funding, nutrition research has been low and flat at both the National Institutes of Health and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And second, that there's nutrition research going on many, many places beyond the NIH and USDA, including, for example, the Centers for Disease Control, the Food and Drug Administration, the Department of Defense is very interested in nutrition, the Veterans Affairs Department, NASA, the Federal Trade Commission, many other organizations are interested in nutrition, and this is fragmented. This is fragmented and not coordinated. And so we've called for kind of really thinking about a new moonshot for nutrition science and innovation to dramatically increase the authority, leadership, and funding for nutrition research. At the pace we're going, as you know, science is advancing and we're learning a lot. And we've learned a lot in the 25 years or so I've been in this field. But at the pace we're going, it'll take us about 50 years to figure out all the stuff we want to know. How, nutrition really impacts our microbiome. What's the optimal nutrition for the first 1,000 days of life? What about food and nutrition and immunity and autoimmune diseases and cancers and brain health and, resistance to pandemics like COVID-19? What about translational research, like how to communicate to the public, how to reduce deep racial and ethnic inequities, and many more? How to guide the public soundly and have them not be so confused. And so, at the pace we're going, it'll take us 50 years to answer all these questions, and we just don't have 50 years. And so, within 10 years, I think we could cut diabetes in half in this country. I think we could. Diabetes is the canary in the coal mine for the metabolic health and the nutritional health of a population, rapidly responsive to improvements or worsening in nutrition. And yet we don't totally understand still the optimal ways to address type 2 diabetes. So let's set a goal to cut diabetes in half by 2030, which would save hundreds of billions of dollars, and invest in nutrition science and innovation to do so, which could include, for example, a new National Institute of Nutrition at NIH.
Right, and coordination among all the different departments, which makes so much sense. In the white paper, there were some shocking statistics. The fact that the government spends $160 billion on direct diabetes care, which is more than a whole bunch of different executive agencies, including NIH and the Education Department. How can it be that there's so much direct care as opposed to prevention? When will we learn?
Well, as a cardiologist, I really know and understand and believe that we need our healthcare system, right? We have an amazing healthcare system, but it's really for sick care. It's for that last that last bit of care when somebody gets really sick. But when we have 70% of American adults overweight or obese, and 50% of American adults having diabetes or prediabetes, more than half of American adults having some form of cardiovascular disease, it's actually much more common to be sick than to be healthy in our country, and almost all of it's due to diet. We have to fix the root of the problem. If the vast majority of houses in the United States were burning right now, right, we wouldn't be going to invest in more firemen. That would not be the right investment, right? We would want to figure out why are all the houses burning, and let's stop them from burning in the future, right? That would be the right goal. But yet we're just investing in the firemen and not in just trying to figure out how to stop the fires. And so we really absolutely need these things. And you mentioned, the white paper. This was the report that we put out, supported by this coalition of organizations to advance nutrition science and coordination. And the numbers are it's just a no-brainer to do this, because the federal government and the states, because they contribute to healthcare spending through Medicaid, they together, just on diabetes, they spend $160 billion a year. The entire budget of the National Institutes of Health is about $40 billion a year. The entire budget of the U.S. Department of Agriculture is about $100 billion a year. And so this $160 billion a year is money that, of course, we need to spend to take care of people with diabetes, but we could be spending in so many better ways if we didn't have diabetes. So rather than just doing that, let's spend $1 billion a year, $2 billion a year on a new national effort for nutrition research. Within a few years, we'll get an immediate return on investment, and we'll save money, and over time, really advance the health of the population.
And work on the messaging that all Americans need to hear, and behavior change is a difficult thing. So you've written and spoken about the first White House conference on nutrition and health, which was put together by Jean Mayer, whose chair you hold at Tufts. There were some incredible recommendations and progress that came out of that. Could you talk about some of those, and that if there were to be a second White House conference, what would your hopes be?
Well, this is something that I've only had the good luck to really learn about in detail in the last few years. And I think most Americans, and even people in our field, don't know much about the 1969 conference. And yet this conference was instrumental to all of our national food and nutrition programming. So in 1969, Jean Mayer, who was a French scientist, he was at Harvard at the time, and then went on to become the president of Tufts University. He helped organize with President Nixon the first and still only White House conference on food, nutrition, and health. And the reason at that time was recognition that there was true caloric hunger in America. Kids with emaciated arms and distended bellies, like really just devastating hunger in America. And so this conference was brought together with bipartisan leadership from Senators McGovern and Dole, George McGovern and Bob Dole, strong support from the White House. And that conference put forward, there's our cat in the background, good for live
you get
video.
100 points for the cat in the background.
Yes, she's a delight, our COVID cat, our COVID kitten. We almost named her Corona.
What did you name her?
Named her Summer. We named her Summer since we got her in the summer. So that conference in 1969 came out with 1,800 recommendations to improve federal food and nutrition policy, mostly focused on hunger. And it really set in place our modern food system. It dramatically expanded and standardized the food stamps program, now SNAP. It dramatically expanded and standardized school lunch. It led to the creation of school breakfast. It led to the creation of the Supplemental Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC. It led ultimately to nutrition facts labeling. It led to changes in how we do the dietary guidelines. So it's very important. And we've basically been riding the coattails of those policies in that conference for 52 years. And as you know, much has changed in our country. We no longer face simply hunger, although hunger remains. We face nutrition insecurity, a dramatic rise in obesity and type 2 diabetes and other diet-related diseases, recognition of just devastating racial inequities and structural racism, huge challenges for sustainability, need for rural development, challenges to national security, that the Department of Defense isn't able to recruit sufficient people, folks for the military because of overweight and obesity, kids in school who aren't, who are hungry and not learning well. So it's time to like reset and reimagine the food system for the next 50 years. And so we, among others, have called on the White House and on Congress next year to we hope, have the second White House conference on food, nutrition, hunger, and health to really address these issues. Now, I don't know if the White House will take up this call, although I know there are certainly champions in Congress, such as Representative Jim McGovern, and in the Senate, such as Senator Cory Booker, who are talking about this. And there are certainly, Secretary Vilsack is an incredible champion for nutrition security and understands these issues, but they have a lot on their plate. So I hope, figuratively speaking, they have a lot on their plate. I hope that to get the healthy food on America's plate, we can have a White House conference in 2022.
I hope so too, and I applaud you for all that you're doing to work toward that. Scientists and activists have for many years talked about the problems of both human health and the health of the planet. And last year, the Eat Lancet report came out, bringing these two issues together. Are you optimistic about the future?
Well, this is, you mentioned the planet. We haven't talked about this. I think the last 30 years have seen the scientific demonstration and now slowly growing recognition that food and nutrition is the biggest issue for human health, full stop. And that when you have the majority of people in many countries sick, we have a broken system, and we need to change the system, not just give people more knowledge and education and hope they do the right thing. This is also now true for the environment. And so, our food and agricultural system is by far the single biggest issue for sustainability on the planet, full stop. And so, 70% of the world's water use, 90% of tropical deforestation, the majority of ocean pollution, loss of our topsoil, 25% of climate change gas, climate gas emissions are all due to food and agriculture. And if you, on top of that, add the opportunity cost of things that we're not doing, things to have regenerative agriculture, to renew the soil and restore carbon and take carbon out of the atmosphere, the impacts are even greater. And so the United Nations has recognized this. They recognize that they're not going to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, which include goals for human health and planetary health, unless they address food. And so this September in New York, along with the General Assembly, there's going to be a UN Food System Summit. Folks who have talked about climate are starting to talk about food as the big issue, not cars and energy alone, but food. So we have to put these things together, and and I would add the third big theme of equity. And so we have to have a food system that advances nutrition, that advances equity, and that is sustainable. And this is not optional, right? Because humanity won't survive if we don't have food that's nourishing and sustainable. We won't survive. And if we don't have it that's equitable, we shouldn't want to survive, right? We should want to have it be equitable. So I think this is the challenge. And I think this is all doable. So I am actually optimistic.
I'm glad to hear.
And I'll share why. Because our modern food system was created very purposefully, not to make us sick, not to trick us, and not to put chemicals in the earth. That's not why it was created. It was created very purposefully in the last century to meet the goals of the last century. The goals of the last century, based on the best available science, were to make sure we all had our vitamins, so we could get rid of vitamin deficiency diseases in the world, and to make sure we had enough calories so that 1 billion people wouldn't starve, because in the 1950s, 1960s, they said 1 billion more people are coming, and we don't have the food to feed them. And so that led to the Green Revolution and a massive increase in monocropping and huge fields of starchy, inexpensive, shelf-stable crops to feed the world. And we've been largely successful. We put our heads together. We did what we intended to do. We've created food products that are fortified with vitamins and have starchy, shelf-stable, cheap calories. So we've prevented mass starvation. And we did what we intended to do. So if you go down the cereal aisle and you see all these boxes of cereal with starch and vitamins, that's what we tried to create on purpose. And what we didn't know at the time was that this would lead to an epidemic of diabetes and obesity, because all of the processing and monocropping and focus on vitamins and calories has taken away what's most important and fundamental about minimally processed, phenolic-rich, fiber-rich foods for our bodies and our microbiomes. And so now we just have to step back and say, okay, we did what we wanted to do, but it's the 21st century. We have a different set of problems. Let's give the right incentives to the private sector. Let's give the funding for the research to the scientists. Let's get governments engaged, and let's fix this. And so I actually think this is doable. And unlike tobacco, which is a public health fight to the death, we want to get rid of tobacco. We don't want to get rid of food. We just want to shift to healthy food. So there's really no losers in the big picture. Industry can be successful, humanity can be healthy, the planet can thrive, our kids can be healthy. I mean, this is win-win.
I agree. And families can be together eating.
Yeah.
This is Mediterranean Diet Month. Do you think that the Mediterranean diet fits with the recommendations of the Eat Lancet report? Is it a sustainable diet for the future?
Well, we should, of course, say, and as you guys know well and talk about, the traditional Mediterranean diet, because the diet in the Mediterranean today, especially among younger generations, has unfortunately shifted more to, kind of a mass-produced, mass-processed, generic, world diet, not the traditional Mediterranean diet.
Correct.
But as I've documented, for example, Dan Buettner in his book Blue Zones and others have documented, there are many traditional diets around the world, including the traditional Mediterranean diet, which share a set of very common foods, and so that common themes, I should say. And those themes are, minimally processed, phenolic-rich, fiber-rich, plant-based foods. And I don't just say plant-based foods because we're not talking about there are also harmful plant-based foods like starch and sugar. But we're talking about minimally processed foods like beans, fruits, nuts, vegetables, and so on. In the Mediterranean diet in particular, also an abundance of healthy fats from seafood, from vegetables, from extra virgin olive oil. So an abundance of healthy fat, although that's not always present in all traditional diets. And then, most kind of animal foods are eaten in moderation and are unprocessed. And so unprocessed natural yogurt and cheese and dairy and poultry and eggs, a little bit of red meat, and then sweets and processed meats are eaten very, very rarely, and that's good for human health and good for planetary health. And while you could change the combinations of oils, healthy plant oils, and fruits and vegetables and nuts in different traditional diets, they all pretty much share that same pattern.
We agree with you completely. Cultural food traditions are a foundational aspect of our work at Oldways, and we see that the traditional diets around the world have more in common than they have differences. As you mentioned, some have less healthy fats, and some have, like the Mediterranean diet, have more. If you had one message to splash across the New York Times headline, what would it be?
I would say food overall, if you put it all together, health, equity, sustainability, our natural resources beyond climate, national security, healthcare spending. I would say food is the single biggest issue and challenge we face, and it's fixable. This is not a footnote. This is not something we need to address after we address climate, after we address jobs, after we address national security, after we address education. This is foundational to all of those things. So food is big and it's all fixable.
Food is big and it's fixable.
Yeah.
And since this is Mediterranean Diet Month, if you were to order from a restaurant a Mediterranean meal or go into your kitchen and prepare it for your family, what would it be?
Well, that's definitely, if I had to kind of pick a diet pattern that I eat, that's definitely the dietary pattern that we eat. We go through extra virgin olive oil, from the big warehouse stores. We get it in bulk, and we go through bottles and bottles of it a week with our 3 kids. We love fish, you know, quick grilled fish with a side of simple vegetables or a salad, and you know, a little bit of cheese, nuts. I mean, that's a very classic food for us. Figs and almonds for breakfast, you know, very simple breakfast with whole fat yogurt. I mean, we're very, very lucky. We're very lucky in our you know, resources, in our knowledge, in our environment, that we can access this. And what I'm passionate about is making sure everyone on the planet, you know, is that lucky. And it shouldn't be just luck. It should be everyone on the planet should be able to shop and cook and eat, you know, the way that my family and other families are able to do so.
With that, I agree with you completely, and I wish you happy Mediterranean Month, and thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Of course, it's a pleasure to speak.